Cairo hosts technical meetings focused on mechanisms for implementing the ceasefire agreement in Gaza. Israel's Security Cabinet ratifies a ceasefire deal to exchange dozens of detainees and pause the 15-month war for an initial 6 weeks. French President Emmanuel Macron affirms his country's support for Lebanon during his visit. It's 4 p.m. Cairo local time, and you're now watching Q News. I'm Halal Hamalawi, and we begin today's bulletin with the latest developments in Gaza. A high-level Egyptian source has confirmed that technical meetings are ongoing in Cairo, focusing on the mechanisms for implementing the ceasefire agreement in Gaza. According to the source, the discussions are centered on the logistics of delivering aid into Gaza, with plans to send 600 trucks per day, as outlined in the truce agreement. The technical meetings, which began today, Friday, in Egypt's capital, Cairo, involve teams from Egypt, Qatar, the United States, and Israel. The goal is to finalize the procedures for the successful implementation of the ceasefire, which has become a critical priority following the recent escalation in Gaza. Al-Qahira News has stated that intensive preparations are underway in North Sinai Governorate for opening the Palestinian side of the Rafah crossing. According to Al-Qahira News, hospitals in Sinai have received hundreds of wounded Palestinians before the Rafah crossing was closed on the Palestinian side. The report also mentioned that Egypt's Minister of Health, Khaled Abdel Ghaffar, is set to visit Sinai hospitals to inspect the health system and operating rooms, which need to be equipped to accommodate the injured Palestinians. Egyptian Foreign Minister Badr Abdelati has discussed developments in the Gaza Strip with his Iranian counterpart Abbas Araghchi, focusing on efforts to reach a ceasefire agreement in the region. The Egyptian Foreign Minister emphasized the importance of the immediate implementation of the ceasefire agreement, stressing the need for all parties to adhere to its provisions according to the agreed-upon timeline. Egyptian Foreign Minister Badr Abdelati and his Italian counterpart Antonio Tajani have emphasized the urgent need to intensify the delivery of humanitarian aid across the Gaza Strip in the coming phase to alleviate the ongoing humanitarian suffering in the region. The call also addressed the ceasefire agreement in Gaza, emphasizing the need to implement its provisions according to the specified timelines. Additionally, the discussion highlighted the importance of international efforts to rebuild Gaza and rehabilitate its infrastructure to restore normalcy. Israel's Security Cabinet has ratified a ceasefire deal to exchange dozens of detainees and pause the 15-month war for an initial 6 weeks. The approval came after an unexpected delay, which sparked fears that last-minute disagreements between Israel and Hamas could scuttle the agreement. Far-right members of the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's coalition government also threatened to derail months of work to end the conflict. The deal will now go to the full cabinet for the final sign-off so that the agreement can be implemented on Sunday, with the release of the first detainees and prisoners. Israelis supporting hard-right politicians have blocked a highway in Jerusalem, denouncing the ceasefire agreement. Around 200 protesters attended a rally near the Israeli parliament and government ministries. The hardliners in Netanyahu's government were still hoping to block the deal, through a majority of ministers were expected to support it. Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich's party stated that it would demand a return to fighting at the end of the truce's first phase as a condition for staying in government. Israel's hardline National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir has stated that he will resign from Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's government if it ratifies the ceasefire deal in Gaza, which he strongly opposes. Israeli media outlets reported earlier that the cabinet was expected to vote to ratify the agreement today, but there has been no confirmation from the Prime Minister's office. This week, Ben-Gvir urged the Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich to join him in a last-ditch attempt to prevent the ceasefire deal, which he described as a dangerous capitulation to Hamas. Smotrich has called the deal to halt the fighting in Gaza and exchange Israeli detainees for Palestinian prisoners a catastrophe for Israel, but has not threatened to quit the government. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has expressed confidence that the Gaza ceasefire agreement between Israel and Hamas will begin as expected on Sunday, January the 19th, despite a last-minute glitch. Blinken, in his final news conference as the U.S. top diplomat, said that he had been speaking with U.S. negotiator Brett McGurk and Qatari officials to resolve the issue. Medical sources have stated that the death toll in Gaza has risen to 103 since the ceasefire agreement was announced, with 264 people reported injured. According to the sources, 82 civilians were killed in northern Gaza, 16 in the south and 5 in the central part of the Strip. Of those affected, 27 were children and 31 were women. The sources also confirmed that 264 civilians sustained various injuries as a result of the ongoing attacks on the Gaza Strip. International Criminal Court prosecutor Karim Khan has defended his decision to bring war crimes allegations against Israel's prime minister, saying that Israel had made no real effort to investigate the allegations itself. The ICC judges issued arrest warrants for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, former Israeli Defense Chief Yoav Gallant, and Hamas leader Ibrahim al-Masri last November on charges of war crimes and crimes against humanity during the Gaza conflict. Israel has rejected the jurisdiction of the Hague-based court and denies the allegations of war crimes. The United States, Israel's main ally, is also not a member of the ICC and has criticized the arrest warrants against Netanyahu and Gallant. And for more analysis, we now move to Mark in our newsroom. To you, Mark.
Thank you, Hannah. So for more analysis on Gaza, we are joined from occupied Jerusalem by the member of Palestinian National Civil Action Authority, Ratiba Natsha. Thank you very much for joining us here on Qnews. So what do you make of the Israeli cabinet's approval of the Gaza ceasefire agreement?
Yes, still this approval is not a real agreement, because still we have voices inside the cabinet that says that they will agree on the first period of this agreement and not to go to the second and the third level of it. So we are talking about a partly agreement on this deal, and still we are looking for more and more pressure on Israel to make sure that the second and the third period of this agreement will be implemented as well as the first one.
Well, that is a worrying development, isn't it? If some members of the government are not going to vote for the future phases of the agreement, so where do we go from here?
It's like a play for this government. They are trying to make some plays to gain more and more from this deal, and maybe to have other deals from, if it's really an exception from this government to the deal or not yet. We have like Ben Gvir, who exit from this government, and he says that he will be out of the government for 24 hours, so he will not voted on the deal this morning, but maybe tomorrow he will be in the government again, and he will as well as his group in the cabinet will work to put some obstacles on this deal, because Ben Gvir, as we know, he is the minister that he is responsible about the internal security in Israel, and he is the one that will let not the Palestinian prisoners go out of the jail, and he will give the names, and the police still waiting for these names of list. So if we don't have like a list of the Palestinian prisoners, the first agreement, that means that the Israeli side will not go on this agreement, as well as we have other members of the Knesset and are not agreeing on this deal, and they are Netanyahu for a written promise that he will not go for the second and the third phases of this agreement, and he will just implement the first phase, which continue turning back the Israeli hostage.
Now, of course, the government's vote on the agreement was postponed until today. It was meant to be yesterday. Do you think there's any chance that there might be delays in the implementation of the agreement, which is meant to be on Sunday?
They are trying to make some delaying, and some voices ask that they will be ready on Monday to start implementing this agreement. But on the other side, Hamas says that they will start the ceasefire agreement from Sunday. That means that the three hostages that they must be set free in the first day of the ceasefire on Sunday will be set free on Sunday, and they will not wait for the Israeli side to accept them or to prepare themselves or not. So the Israeli side will not have any excuses that Hamas is delaying this deal inside, and the other side, Hamas want to put pressure on the international community, on Israel, on everyone, to start this ceasefire on Sunday without any delays, because they, in their point of view, that every delay means more and more Palestinian killed in the Israeli attack, and more Israeli hostages targeted in these attacks on Gaza, as well as the Palestinian civilians attack.
Now, do you think Israel could resume its attacks, or might there be guarantees to prevent that from happening?
The guarantees must come from the United States. That can put pressure on Israel for this resume, because we know that the Israeli behavior didn't respect any agreements, didn't respect the international law, and didn't respect anyone without having force on it to implement these deals. So we hang a lot of hope on Egypt for its role, as well as the United States and other states, to put pressure on Israel to resume these attacks and to start the ceasefire on Sunday as it agreed.
Let me ask you about the time between now and the ceasefire implementation. Do you think that Israel will intensify its strikes on Gaza in the coming hours?
Yes, since the announcement of the agreement till now, we have over than 70 Palestinians killed on these attacks, and these attacks are continuously without any stopping or changing in the rhythm of it since that the time till now. And I think that Israel will use every single minute before the start of the ceasefire on Sunday, 11:30 a.m., to achieve more and more goals and to show the Israeli community as well that they are not going to this deal in the point of weakness. And the other side, they are still seeking these victory and they are putting their rules and controlling everything that happens, and no one is putting pressure on Israel. So to improve all of these stories and telling of Netanyahu about the victory and about controlling and about that no one can put pressure on him, he will continue to attack Gaza till the last minute.
Well, thank you very much, Ratiba Natsha, for joining us here on Q News once again. That was the member of Palestinian National Civil Action. Ratiba Natsha, thank you very much. It's back to you, Hella.
Thank you very much, Mark. Moving on, the World Health Organization has called for the international community to step up and fund a scaled-up aid response in Gaza after Israel and Hamas reached a ceasefire deal. The UN Health Agency said that its member states, donors and the global community, including the private sector, should support both the urgent health needs and the longer-term rebuilding of Gaza's healthcare system. The peppercorn said that the WHO was ready to deliver, although the significant security and political obstacles to delivering aid across Gaza need to be removed. Speaking at the same briefing, the WHO Director General Tedros Adhanom, the WHO said that the WHO is seeking $1.5 billion to help more than 300 million people living in 42 emergency zones. The UN Special Rapporteur on the Palestinian territories has described the continued bombing of Gaza after the announcement of a ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas as an act of profound bad faith. Speaking via video link to a news conference in Rome, Francesca Albanese nevertheless said that she was elated that Palestinians might be able to return to normalcy and relieved the Israeli detainees could be released as a result of the ceasefire agreement. Palestinian Prime Minister Mohammed Mustafa has met with top representatives of the European Union in Brussels just hours after a ceasefire and detainee release deal was announced. Mustafa met with European Council President Antonio Costa and EU Parliament President Roberta Metsola on Thursday. Costa stressed that the European bloc remains committed to a comprehensive, just and lasting peace based on the two-state solution and vowed to continue providing humanitarian aid and support for the UN Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees, UNRWA, and the Palestinian Authority as well. And now we move on to the latest developments in Lebanon.
كل المستهدفين هن مدنيين. وضع شيء مرعب، شيء بخوف.
French President Emmanuel Macron has affirmed France's steadfast support for Lebanon during his visit to the Baabda presidential palace. Macron stressed the need for international support for Lebanon's reconstruction, praising the Lebanese people's solidarity during the war and their efforts to return displaced persons. He also announced plans to train 500 Lebanese soldiers and support UNIFIL in southern Lebanon. Macron highlighted efforts to demarcate borders along the Blue Line to promote stability. Emphasizing Lebanon's sovereignty, he called for the complete withdrawal of Israeli forces from southern Lebanon and described the ceasefire as the end of an intolerable period of violence. For his part, the Lebanese president noted that trust in the country has been restored, with the population committed to recovery.
ولا ننسى شيئا وكلماتكم الآن قوية جدا كما كانت كلماتكم اليوم.
Lebanese caretaker Prime Minister Najib Mikati has expressed hope that all aspects of the deal will be upheld. When asked if France promises that Israel will withdraw its troops from Lebanon, a former French protectorate, by the end of the 60-day truce, Mikati said that this was not discussed. The election of a new president and the appointment of a new prime minister are expected to boost international confidence in Lebanon and unlock the funds needed for reconstruction following the Israel-Hezbollah war, which killed more than 4,000 people and wounded over 16,000 in Lebanon. Meanwhile, in Syria, Syria's military operations chief Ahmad al-Shara has stated that his country is ready to welcome UN forces into the UN-established buffer zone with Israel. Speaking at a joint news conference with Qatari Prime Minister and Foreign Minister Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdulrahman Al Thani, al-Shara also condemned Israel's advance into the buffer zone with Syria, calling for an immediate withdrawal. EU Crisis Management Chief Hajj Al-Habib has announced a €235 million aid package for Syria and neighboring countries during the first visit by a senior EU official since Bashar al-Assad's ouster. The trip comes 2 weeks after foreign ministers from France and Germany visited, calling for a peaceful inclusion transition. Al-Habib has said that the funding will contribute to basic needs like shelter, food, clean water, sanitation, healthcare, education, and emergencies, among others. Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian has told his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin that he believes their two countries could finalize agreements on the construction of a nuclear power plant in Iran. The two leaders were meeting in the Kremlin ahead of a planned signing of a strategic cooperation treaty. The Kremlin has stated that it does not anticipate the United States easing its stance on sanctions against Russian oil once President-elect Donald Trump takes office. The Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov was commenting on remarks by Trump's choice for Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent that he 100% supports raising sanctions on Russian oil producers if Trump asks him to. Peskov said that Russia could not expect the United States to fundamentally change its stance on the sanctions. And that brings us to the end of our news bulletin. Here is what we have been covering. Cairo hosts technical meetings focused on mechanisms for implementing the ceasefire agreement in Gaza. Israel's Security Cabinet ratifies a ceasefire deal to exchange dozens of detainees and pause the 15-month war for an initial 6 weeks. French President Emmanuel Macron affirms his country's support for Lebanon during his visit. And this concludes our news bulletin for this hour. Don't forget to follow Q News on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok at Qnews EG to stay informed. I'm Hala Al-Hamalawi. Thank you very much for watching and stay tuned for more updates here on Q News.